All right, welcome everybody to the Big Cat's Room. Tonight, the person that we're talking to is Marty Irby, and he has such an interesting story that I think you guys will really enjoy because he has become an amazing advocate for animals. And he kind of is like the perfect example of how one person can really be a voice for these animals. So, Marty, what I'd love for you to tell people is how you got started in this and then what you do currently in your role at Animal Wellness Action. And then after about 15 or 20 minutes of hearing all about you, then we're open it up to the people in the room and they can raise their hands and come up and ask you specific questions. But I'm thinking so many of the people in this room are people who are really passionate about protecting big cats specifically and a lot of other different animals, and they will be absolutely inspired by how you got started and what you have done since you got started. So take it away, Marty.
Yes, well, Carol, thank you so much for having me today. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate both you and Howard and all you guys do for the cause. So I actually, to make a long story short, I'll try to keep this brief, but I grew up in South Alabama. My father was a horse trainer and trained Tennessee walking horses, and they performed this enhanced artificial gait known as the big lick that's prized in the southeastern U.S., primarily Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, and North Carolina. And this artificial high step can only be achieved by a practice known as soring, S-O-R-I-N-G, where they intentionally soar the horse's foot by applying caustic chemicals such as diesel fuel or kerosene or mustard oil to the horse's pasterns. They also many times put sharp objects underneath the horse's hooves to create pain at the bottom of the horse's foot. And then they very legally, unfortunately, the practice of soring for the purposes of show or sale is illegal, but the devices they use to exacerbate the pain on the horse's feet are not illegal. And they use these ankle chains that it's literally a chain they put around the horse's pastern. And when the chain hits that sore skin, it makes the horse lift its leg higher to get away from the pain. And they put these large stacked shoes on the bottom of the horse's feet that could be as tall as 10 inches or so. And that exacerbates the pain on the bottom of the horse's foot. So at the end of the day, the horse who steps the highest for the most part is who wins the prize. And that's where all of these horses are competing at an event that is held the last 10 days of August or so, ending on the Saturday night before Labor Day in Shelbyville, Tennessee, just about an hour south of Nashville, known as the Tennessee Walking Horse National Celebration. So I grew up starting riding, they tell me by myself at the age of 3, but I don't remember learning how to ride. So it's always just been a part of me, and I showed and competed from the age of 4 until about the age of 30. So a little more than 25 years, and I tell people I retired after that, but I started early and won 8 world championships. The majority of them were not with these horses with the shoes and the chains on their feet. They were sound, natural, what I call flat shod horses that just have like a keg shoe or a very light shoe on. And for many years in the breed, I tried to help transition things away from this terrible practice and into the more natural gait that the horse performs, which is a beautiful, wonderful gait that the horse has. And in 2010, a group of the older gentlemen in the industry who had been really trying to stop soring for years asked me if I would run for president of the Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders and Exhibitors Association, which is the breed registry established in 1935. And I did. I agreed to the night before the election and won and became president. I really didn't have any plan at all. And I started working as a result of being elected president with someone at the Humane Society of the United States who had also been elected to our board and worked probably, I would say, more covertly and behind the scenes during that period of time, helping them with information on how to expose some of this soring and that sort of thing. And the second year I was president in 2011, I was over in Germany, Winding, Germany, judging a horse show. And in Winding, Germany, they don't allow any of this mess on the horse's feet. You're not even allowed to clip the horse's whiskers. I mean, they're as natural as they come. and was judging this horse show, and the Humane Society came out with an expose of a big lick sore trainer known as Jackie McConnell, who lived over in West Tennessee. And it was on national news all across the country and all around the world, really. So I got to see the world's reaction to this expose. While being in a foreign country, I think it was a perspective no one else will probably ever have, having been in the shoes I was in at the time and where I was. But it really gave me an opportunity, I felt, to finally make the change that I thought should have happened years ago. So I started speaking up very loudly against this practice, to my own detriment. My family is still deeply entrenched in it. And as a result of my endorsement of a federal bill called the Prevent All Soring Tactics, or PAST Act, that would ban the use of those shoes and chains. It would also create a new inspection program at the USDA. Currently, they have sort of an incestuous self-policing program that's very ineffective. And it would also increase the penalties of soaring to felony level penalties. So I spoke out in support of this legislation and knew it was going to be bad. My business was actually in construction and real estate. Horses were my hobby, and that position I had was a volunteer position. So as a result of speaking out publicly for this legislation, my wife and I divorced. I lost my business, had to file for bankruptcy. I could have written a country music song about it. I mean, my father and I didn't speak for 5.5 years over it. And a month or two after this occurred, I woke up one morning and found myself on the front cover above the fold of the Tennessean, which is the largest paper in the state. And that created even more animosity towards me, and I had death threats and all sort of things. So the congressman who had introduced the PAST Act, Congressman Ed Whitfield from Kentucky, who represented the western third of the state at the time, called me and reached out and asked if I would come to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress that fall at a hearing about this practice. So I agreed to do that. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of telling a few people that I was going to do that, and that spread and led to even more death threats. And I eventually came to D.C. in October of 2013 for that hearing to testify. Amidst my first week here, they had a government shutdown for about 3 weeks. And so I was just here waiting for this hearing to be rescheduled. And the members of Congress staff were gone because they had a government shutdown, and I had access to all these members of Congress and never really intended to become a lobbyist, but I discovered I was pretty good at it and got like 100 co-sponsors on this bill in just a very, very short period of time. And then ultimately testified at that hearing, had some more death threats, and the Huffington Post took the death threats I had in writing and made the guy that did that a little famous, or infamous rather. And I haven't had many since then, because I think people learned that at least if they put it in writing, or I could figure out who it was, they were going to be exposed. And the congressman said, well, you've lost everything. You're here. You only have 2 nickels to rub together. Why don't you just stay here with me and my wife at our house until you get back on your feet? And I said, well, sure. I might as well. And I stayed for 2 or 3 weeks. And ultimately, one of his staff members left his team to go run for Congress. And then he said, well, would you just come work for me and be a legislative aide? I did that for a short period of time, and then ultimately became his press secretary and communications director, and worked on animal welfare policy work and agriculture policy work, in addition to some other areas, and did that for a couple of years. We've still never gotten this bill, the PAST Act, signed into law. I've been working on it for 10 years now, but I know, Carol, you can relate to that with the Big Cat Public Safety Act you've been working on for so many years. We did get this legislation passed through the House of Representatives in 2019 by working with Speaker Pelosi and the Majority Leader in the House, Steny Hoyer, and renamed the bill after my dear friend, the late U.S. Senator Joseph Tidings, who was a Democrat from Maryland and authored the Horse Protection Act of 1970. This new bill would amend that Horse Protection Act. And we passed it by a vote of 333 to 96, but it was dead on arrival in the Senate, with opposition from the senators from Kentucky and Tennessee, and to a lesser degree, the senators from Alabama. And so we worked for a couple of years to try, about 18 months, I'd say, to try to forge some provisions that we could get through. Ultimately, that still failed. We've gone to the USDA in the past and worked to try to get a regulation done that would accomplish 2/3 of that PAST Act. It was finalized in 2016, but rolled back when the Trump administration came in, and just saw last week that the USDA announced they were formally withdrawing the rule that was kind of on the shelf, as you would call it, and starting over from scratch. So it could be a long time before we stop this practice, but I've been working on it. We've been consistent. We're going to stay after it. We're going to do whatever it takes to get this bill done, however long it takes, and accomplish the goal to save these horses. And just moving back to when I worked in Congress, eventually Mr. Whitfield retired, and a friend at the Humane Society, who was president of the Humane Society then, recruited me to come work at the Humane Society, and I ran the equine protection department for several years and served as one of the chief lobbyists at the Humane Society Legislative Fund before leaving with a group from the Humane Society to start Animal Wellness Action in 2018, where I'm currently the executive director, and work on a variety of animal welfare issues. Of course, right now in 2021 and 2022, our number one priority is the Big Cat Public Safety Act. We've gotten 7 other federal bills signed into law since 2018 when we opened up the organization. And probably the biggest accomplishment I'm most proud of is the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act that we were able to get signed into law in December of last year, that takes effect in 2022, and outlawed the use of all drugs in American horse racing on race day, and created the national standard for uniform testing rules and regulations overseen by the U.S. anti-doping agency, USADA, that oversees the Olympic testing, many sporting events, and things like that. So we continue to work to try to help all animals, whether it's dogs and cats or horses or chimpanzees and monkeys that are being tested on. I was very, very fortunate, as you mentioned early, to be named one of the Hill's top lobbyists for the past 3 years. There are about 20,000 or so lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and that's roughly 200 people, so it's the top 1%. And last year, actually, as a result of the work on the soaring issue, and probably to a lesser degree the horse racing issue, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of England, honored me with an award. It was only the second time in history the British Crown had done this for my work to protect horses. So it's been fun. It's been quite a roller coaster, but I love what I do, love working with people like Carol Baskin and so many others in the animal field, and we're really making a lot of headway and making change, and it's very fulfilling work.
You know, there's so many points along the way there that I think most people would have given up, and all of the sacrifices that you have made in order to pursue what you know to be right. And I love the fact that you're, taking the attitude that you're just going to keep hammering away at the horse soaring bill until you get that done. And I know that you will continue to hammer away at the Big Cat Public Safety Act. I just got through with 3 days with you on the Hill, and it was absolutely amazing to work with you those 3 days, because I think we made such a great tag team in that you are so knowledgeable of all of these different players. You've come to build relationships with these members of the staff and with the members themselves, and it was just beyond my wildest dreams of how effective that we could be on those 3 days. So could you tell people a little bit about the scheduling that you did and how many people that we actually got to meet with?
Yes, and it was a wonderful few days, Carol. I'd say the best time I've had lobbying since January of 2019. It's been a little tricky with COVID-19 and then the events of January 6th earlier this year, and the Capitol has been on lockdown. But as everyone here knows, your name is well recognized on Capitol Hill. And so I sent out a meeting request for Carol coming up last Tuesday and stayed through Friday afternoon. And we met with about 40 or so members of Congress and their staff. I think it was probably 75% the actual members of Congress, 25 or 30% of the time. We probably met with staff on Friday mostly because the members had left. But we had fabulous meetings with many members of Congress, like Congressman Dan Crenshaw, Jake LaTurner from Kansas. I know Beth Van Dyne from Texas. She has already co-sponsored the Big Cat Public Safety Act as a result of your trip here. And we really accomplished a lot. I think the more that we can do of that, the better off this legislation is going to be and our effort is. And I appreciate that you're coming back in January to do the same again, because it really does make a difference when you are here and you're in person and you're an expert on the issue. I'm no expert on big cats. I can talk about Congress and policy and politics and the maneuvers you have to go through and that sort of thing. But the people that were here listening to Carol were just captivated. And I learned so much from you being here that it made me a better lobbyist on this issue, because there were so many things that I didn't even really understand about how the cats that are raised for cub petting and bred here in the U.S. actually are impacting the cats in the wild, who are basically going away and may be gone in 5 or 6 years because of the trade in these wildlife parks. So it was very fascinating to learn all of this, and us to be able to take that knowledge that you have and apply it to what we're doing today. And, you know, there's probably no one that I know in the animal world that's been through more than you. I was talking earlier about the death threats, but you've had firsthand death threats, people in your face actually, you know, hiring someone. So I can't imagine what that would be like, and just think the world of you. And you probably have more guts and fortitude than anyone I know.
That's awfully sweet of you to say. A lot of the people here are lobbyists on their own. They're not registered. I guess you're a registered lobbyist, right?
Right. Yeah.
So for people that are just going and lobbying on their own, is there advice that you can give them as to what would be most effective for them?
Yes. Well, you know, I think most important is that you, at any turn, and it's difficult today with COVID-19, but meet with your legislators in person or meet with their staff in person. You don't have to necessarily do it in D.C. You could do it back in the district when they're there from time to time. About half the time they do spend back in their district. And I think, you know, there are a lot of different avenues to be able to advocate or lobby, if you want to label it as that you can contact your members of Congress, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media, all of these various platforms that there are. But I would always say that in person is the best. Second would be a phone call, from my view, because there are so many people there that just relate better to a voice at the other end of the phone, and it's harder for them to turn you away, and it's harder for them to say no. And then third, you know, writing in a message, which is good to do both when you're calling. I think writing in a message through their website, or if you have the staff contacts, direct email to the staff directly, explaining, you know, what you're seeking and what you're asking them to do with the right materials. I am one that, you know, I believe that brevity is very important. I might follow up with an email with 2 or 3 paragraphs and 1 or 2 attachments or something like that. I've seen people load up staff with just piles of information, and it's very difficult for them to sift through that. So anytime you have, you know, just 1 or 2 documents, a 1-pager or something like that, that's very helpful, because the attention span around this place is just so short. There are 750,000 people roughly in every congressional district that the House of Representatives represents. And so within that 750,000, you may have about 12 to 14 staff total between the district staff and the DC staff. Now, it's a lot different for the senators. They have a much bigger staff, but, you know, some of them have 10 million people in one state, so, or more than that. So it's a lot of work. And these people that are typically in their early 20s, maybe into their early 30s, are very young, they're very smart, but they haven't had a lot of experience in life, and they're getting every issue in the book thrown at them, whether it's healthcare or what's going on with the Big Cat Public Safety Act or fuel prices and all these sort of things. So you have to be able to keep our message, or your message, whatever you're advocating for, at the top of the heap. And I do think that's one thing that the animal space has done a great job of advocating, is getting those messages in, getting those calls in, doing lobby days, sending that tweet, whatever it is. I can tell you that there are more members of Congress that tell me frequently, and more in a growing number, that they hear more about animal issues than either anything else that their office is hearing about, or within the top 3 or 4 or 5 issues they're hearing about. But consistently across the board over time, I would say it's the number 1 or number 2 issue, because a lot of these things they're hearing about pop up. It may be relevant for a month or 2 or 3, and then it's no longer necessarily that relevant. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who's a Democrat from Illinois, has told me for the past 20 years she's been in Congress, this has always been one of the top issues she hears about. And then recently I had a Republican from North Carolina, Ted Budd, who's a House member running for the Senate. He told me that he heard more about our issues, and this is a guy who owns a hunting store in North Carolina. He heard more about our issues than anything else his office had people write in about, and he's co-sponsored a lot of bills. We're still trying to get him on the big cat bill, but he's been very good and surprising for someone who owns a hunting store, of course. But I think that this resonates across the board with Democrats and Republicans alike. I know Carol has met a couple of our friends, Nancy Mace, who's a newly elected freshman congresswoman from Charleston, South Carolina. I was just down yesterday with her in her district, checking out a facility where they breed monkeys to turn around and sell to laboratories who are testing on them. And we were trying to shine light on this terrible occurrence that's happening down there. And I'm seeing more people like her and the newer people coming into Congress stepping up and joining on these animal issues and being a part of it. And it's simply because of the voters and the advocates out there like you all that are contacting them. I do think, if I could give you a little advice, sometimes I've found that the folks in the animal space are very, very passionate like I am, like Carol is. And the most important thing to remember, no matter how passionate you are, is always be polite and nice with the staff and the members of Congress. Most people are, but I've had some instances where people got pretty ugly, and that never helps us. There are a few members of Congress that we know are probably never going to help us do anything, and one or two of them have left recently. But for the most part, I think every member of Congress, 90% of them, have joined on one animal issue or something they're helping with. There are a lot that have joined on all of the bills that you could name out there, but we always want to make sure that we have someone in each district, in each state, that is really on top of it, staying on top of their federal legislators and just communicating them in a nice manner about what the issue is. And, I guess it's that old saying, honey will get you a lot further than vinegar. And that definitely is the case here, what I found in Washington, D.C.
You're absolutely right on that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I don't think we stress that enough. Karen, I know you always have questions, so I'm going to hand it over to you and let you go first.
Thank you. I'm just listening to all this, and I hear, the word lobbyist, and I can't help but to get so excited. I just kind of consider myself a rogue lobbyist. I don't know what else I'd call myself. Certainly not a registered lobbyist, but I have actually gone to, I live in New Jersey, so I've actually met with staff for Gottheimer and Booker, and I actually was trying to think who else, but I even had a cup of coffee with Josh Gottheimer. So all about Big Cat Public Safety Act, and I included in there deep stuff from some of the people that I work with for HSUS. But I love what you do. I'm impressed. I'm amazed, and thank you so much for all of that. I would love to, as I, learn more about it, even do more. But what I was wondering is, being a lobbyist, how do you choose? Like, obviously, with the Big Cat Public Safety Act, you knew Carol or heard of Carol or were involved with her at some level. But how do you choose the bills? There's so many. Do you choose which ones you're passionate about, or do you ones that are more popular? How do you actually go about that?
That's a very, very good question. And let me say first, Karen, your Senator Cory Booker, there's no better member of Congress on animal issues than Cory Booker, both sides of the aisle. He is amazing.
He is
Gottheimer
the best.
Is terrific, too. Gottheimer's
Yes.
been terrific. He actually helped us get past that through the House when we did through a new rule that he is one of the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus came up with. So you have some fantastic legislators there in your state. And I think, the way that we go about trying to decide what the priority is, because I probably work on, 20 or 25 different bills, everything from the Greyhound Protection Act to the PAST Act to the Big Cat Bill, the Fda Modernization Act that deals with animal testing, the Kangaroo Protection Act that deals with kangaroo leather. For me, I prioritize based on what I think we can get done in any forward something that we just don't think can realistically pass. Now, we, over the long haul, over time, may consistently keep working on it, but we try to pick 2 or 3 each Congress that are the top priorities. And I think I started working on the big cat bill right at the tail end of when I was leaving HSUS. I did a little bit of lobbying on it there, but we've really taken it on since we started Animal Wellness Section. I know we have 250 House co-sponsors now. I think 50 Republicans, more than twice what we had last time. The Senate number is growing tremendously as well. And so I feel like in this Congress, the bill that stands the best chance of passing and getting done is the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And that's why we've made it priority number 1. And priority number 2 is the Fda Modernization Act, which would simply amend a 1938 statute that requires animal testing on any drugs approved by the FDA optional instead of a mandate. Most people don't realize that the federal government broke the federal law to create the COVID-19 vaccines. They weren't necessarily tested on animals. And so that shined light on this issue. And that's resonating with people on both sides of the aisle as well, because it is tied into COVID, and that's still the number 1 topic around Washington, D.C. for sure. So I think those 2 bills we can get done, and that's why we've made them the top priority. There's a third piece of legislation known as the Meats or Super Spreaders Act that would phase out meat farming in the U.S. because meats, it's tied back to COVID as well, are the number 1 super spreader of COVID. They can contract the virus, mutate it, give it back to humans, and create a new variant, which is why Denmark has depopulated all of their meats, and other countries are doing as well. I, still continue to work on the PAST Act, as I said, but I'm under no disillusions that it's going to pass anytime soon. It might be another 10 years before we get it done because of the obstacles that we face there. Probably the easiest thing I think we've ever gotten passed was the Dog and Cat Meat Trade Prohibition Act that made consuming dog meat and cat meat in the U.S. illegal. We got that done in the 2018 Farm Bill. But when you're talking about eating dogs and cats, that's pretty much everyone who's going to be against that. There was one member of Congress who went on television and said that he thought you should be able to eat dogs and cats, and he didn't get reelected. So
no, I would think not.
But I think really understanding what can and can't get done and what can and can't pass are the most important things. So that's how we've chosen those priorities for this Congress. And the other bills, some of them we may just be building the co-sponsor count on. Some of them we may just be trying to get a hearing on. Some of them are just messaging bills like the Kangaroo Protection Act. I don't think that will probably ever pass and get signed into law, but we're using federal legislation as a messaging bill to push Nike, Adidas, and others to stop using kangaroo skins on their soccer shoes. Most people don't realize that's a thing, but it's called K-leather, and the state of California outlawed it. I think it's the only state. We've got an opportunity to do it in New Jersey, but this is a federal bill that's driving the message on that front. We also have the Greyhound Protection Act that has a ton of co-sponsors, 80 or 90 co-sponsors, thanks to the great work of Grade 2K, and we're utilizing that bill to try to help bring an end to the Greyhound racing at the very last 2 tracks in the country that are operating and haven't made an announcement that they were going to end live Greyhound racing. They're both in West Virginia. They passed a bill through the state legislature there that the governor vetoed, so we know we can't get a state bill done there, and that's why we moved to federal legislation on that front. So, I look at legislation as a tool. It's not always necessarily about passing it or getting it signed into law. It's how it can drive the conversation forward to the ultimate end that we're out there seeking.
Well, I just learned something just now. That's amazing. Instead of me jumping in and asking each person if they have a comment or question for Marty, I'm just going to hand it to Daniel, and then you can hand it to the next person down the line, and each of you can do that, and I'll just be quiet.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Marty, for answering my question. I appreciate it very much. I would love to do what you do and someday hope to. So, okay, Daniel, you go for it, babe.
Okay. Hi. I live in Delaware, and both my senators and my representative are co-sponsors of the bill. And also from my home state, Fitzpatrick. He actually is from my county where I grew up.
Oh, yeah. Bucks County.
Yep. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the people on this bill. I guess I have a question. I know that last time the bill was introduced, it passed through the House fairly easily, but when it hit the Senate, it foobarred and didn't get passed. And I know on the news we hear a lot about this filibustering that they're using on bills. And with Mitch McConnell in the last Congress, do you think that'll be an issue with this bill, or do you think it should be able to get through without the filibuster?
Well, there are several different mechanisms to be able to pass a bill through the Senate, and we jokingly say around here, I shouldn't joke and say it, but that all good things die in the Senate. So that happens with 75% of the legislation that passes the House. It was not as easy, I think, as people thought for us to get the bill through the House in the last Congress. We got it done thanks to Carol Howard and so many other team members working on this thing right at the end of the Congress, at the first of, I think it was December 3rd of last year. So that only left us like maybe 2 or 3 weeks to even have a shot at getting it through the Senate. And it just wasn't enough time. They didn't take the bill up. But I don't think there was any intentional targeting toward the bill. It was just like what we see with so many other pieces of legislation, a giant pile that's piling up over there in the Senate that they don't take up. I think with this instance, when you're talking about the filibuster, I have yet to see a piece of animal legislation move through the Senate via the actual Senate floor with a full debate and amendments offered and that sort of thing. And that would be the process we're talking about with the filibuster. What is most likely to happen is that we get the bill passed through the House on what they call the suspension calendar, where they suspend the rules of the House, and if 2/3 of the members vote in support of the bill, it just passes automatically, and that's what happened last year. We were really tight on getting that 2/3, though, because of some messaging that came out at the last minute that was not our fault or really even directed at the bill. It was timing on things. So I think, our probably best shot at this stage in the game is getting it through the House on suspension, taking the House bill over to the Senate, and then doing what they call a hotline, where they hotline the bill and send a message out to all the senators and ask if anyone opposes the bill, and then some will put a hold on it. Typically, it's Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Mike Lee. I feel like we'll be good with 2 out of 3 of those. We have one that's got a question mark by his name. We're trying to figure out where he might stand on the issue, and hopefully we'll be able to meet with him when Carol comes back up in January. And then if it passes in that way, it will go straight to the president's desk. Alternatively, you could take, and I guess this is really what's the most likely scenario, the Senate bill and hotline it, and should it pass by unanimous consent, send that over to the House to pass the Senate bill, because the House has already passed it one time, and sometimes they sort of have a little feeling like now it's the Senate's turn, even though if it wasn't in a previous Congress that the bill passed. And other options would include legislation that's moving through the Congress in a broader bipartisan sense related to the Committee of Jurisdiction. So in the Senate, this bill has been referred to the Senate Energy and Public Works Committee, EPW, and in the House, it's under the House Natural Resources Committee. So what we're trying to do is to find legislation that we know is going to move through those committees that we could attach this bill to as an amendment, either in the committee or probably even likely as some of the language in a base bill at some point. But then could also be a floor amendment. So I know I'm giving you a lot of different scenarios here, but I think where we are today, we're probably going to see the senators do a hotline on this bill, see where they are at the first of the year, if we're able to pass it through by unanimous consent, or work out any differences with some of the senators that would put a hold on it to try to see how we can get them to support it, then carry it over to the House. And it should pass the House very easily and go to the president's desk. We had been looking at a larger package that was related to more of the environmental space, but also wildlife and some of those issues. And when Carol was here last week, we talked to a number of the staff on the Senate side, and we're just not certain that that legislation is going to actually go somewhere. So we don't want to restrict ourselves and just be sitting there waiting to find this bill that have something to do. We want to keep working every angle on it.
Thank you very much. Dawn, you're next.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Marty. Just wanted to say I'm from Illinois, and all three of my reps are co-sponsors, finally. And I am a big animal lover, and I am aware of that horse because I do follow horse rescues. So I am totally aware of what you were saying and them trying to get those big licks, away from them horses because it's horrible for them. Yeah. And so I am a big animal lover, and I'm here to fight with everybody. So.
Well, thank you for your support. It really means a lot, and I'm glad that you're aware of the issue. It's going to take a while, but we just need everyone to keep chipping away at it. We'll get there eventually.
You betcha. And Barb, take it away.
Well, thanks, Dawn. Hi, my name is Barb, and I'm from Minnesota, and I believe Amy Klobuchar is signed on to the bill. As far as I know, I don't know anybody else is from Minnesota. But here in Minnesota, we have what we call Humane Lobby Day, and it's in March, and a bunch of us from the Humane Society actually go to the Capitol. We talk to our representatives about issues that are here in Minnesota, like different kind of hunting traps, or I think we did the wolves one year, but that kind of thing. And I don't know if they have that in other states, but if you do, any of you guys, I would get involved in that because it helps you feel more comfortable going to talk to these people. So I don't know if there is anybody else who does that, Humane Lobby Day or something like that in there. I think ours is done through the Humane Society of the United States. So I don't know.
There are a bunch of lobby days on the state level very regularly, and on the federal level too. I mean, we've had, I would probably call it more of a fly-in is what we refer to it, but we've had people from all walks of life and the animal space and both sides of the aisle come to DC. Most of it has been a little difficult for 2020 and 2021 just because of COVID, but I do feel like the state legislatures have been much more open and welcoming to people than the federal legislature has here in DC over the past year or two. Hopefully we'll see that open back up and see some more of these lobby days occur. But we welcome anyone who wants to come to DC, and I'm typically here and not that engaged on the state level issues, but I know there's probably one in every state, if not 45 out of 50 states.
Yeah, because I would say, I know some people say, they're nervous. I mean, it is. You're walking into the Capitol, and it's busy and all that. But when you do the lobby days, you have a group of you, you're coached by people, your hand is held. It's a very safe, very comfortable environment. So I'm, just saying to all of you who are, listening to this call, if you are nervous, find out who's doing that in your area and participate in that. But thank you so much for what you do.
Yes, no, thank you. We appreciate all your advocacy and work and those lobby days. Thanks for bringing it up. That's very, very important for everyone.
Hi, my name is Nancy. Hi, Carol and Marty. Thank you so much for everything that you did last week in D.C. The results were very encouraging, and the number of people you were able to talk to, it was just really encouraging. I'm from Alabama and was encouraged by the people you were able to contact and speak with and share with. So that's just very encouraging. Marty, what do you think is the most important thing if you're speaking to a legislator or even another citizen that you want to ask to make the call of the wild? What's the most important thing to say to them for those ingrained beliefs? Like, I've always taken my kids to the zoo, or I've always been in horse racing. What's the most helpful thing you found?
Well, I think that's really interesting. So I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama. What part of Alabama are you from?
I'm from Tuscaloosa.
Okay. I've been there many times. I love my home state and glad to have somebody back home on here. Alabama has been a very tough delegation, I will say, on our issues. Fortunately, we have made some headway in the past year because there are two new members. Carol and I met with Senator Tuberville in person while she was here, and I've talked to him 4 or 5 times about the Big Cat Public Safety Act. I'll let Carol take, but I think we're pretty close to hopefully getting him to co-sponsor the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And there is another member who's a new freshman in the House, Congressman Barry Moore, who represents the area around like Eufaula and Dothan and Enterprise, who has co-sponsored the bill and who's actually helped us get some other people to co-sponsor and really been helpful to us. One of the things that resonates with these folks, and I'm just being more specific to the members from Alabama, is when we're talking about the issue on the Big Cat Public Safety Act, that it is, in fact, not necessarily just an animal welfare issue. It is a public safety issue. And there have been many instances where there were tigers or lions or other animals that got out or were turned loose, like what we saw in Zanesville, Ohio, many years ago, and the law enforcement was out there having to hunt them down and sadly kill them because they could have killed a child at a school bus stop that morning. And so when you look at it from a public safety aspect, I think that is resonating with those members of Congress you're talking about. Now, we actually had a meeting the other day, Carol and I did, where the guy told us that, and he had his son there in the meeting, that he thought that he should still be against this bill because he wanted his son to be able to pet tiger cubs. And that's the tough one to argue with someone if they just have that ingrained so deeply in their mind. But I do think the more that we can create awareness about the public safety aspect of this, and also the cost, sort of an unfunded mandate that these cub petting facilities are throwing on to rescues and groups who ultimately have to take the cats because they're making a small, tiny little bit of money, $20 to take a picture with a tiger cub for a month or two, however long it is. And then, these cats can be a liability of hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime for someone like Carol and Howard at Big Cat Rescue that have to pay for it. So economically, it's a disadvantage to our society and to the local economies, what's going on out there. And I think those are the points that resonate more with the people that you're probably talking about.
Thank you. And it's great to know that Alabama's being well represented
Yeah.
in the lobby function. And that's really encouraging about Senator Tuberville, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Hi, this is Susan, and I'm calling from Europe, the Netherlands. And it's very interesting to hear what you're doing, and I really recommend and applaud your efforts. And I was wondering, what has been the change you've seen in the attitude towards the Big Cat Public Safety Act? And was Tiger King a blessing in disguise for you with regarding to the Big Cat Public Safety Act?
Well, I think for lobbying in Washington, D.C., and I won't speak for Carol, but I think for lobbying in Washington, D.C., it was ultimately the greater good because it created awareness about the issue. It, of course, was terrible the way things were inaccurately portrayed in the show, but people 2 years ago didn't know near about the tiger issue, all of the big cat issues, or the Big Cat Public Safety Act like what they do today. And timing when it was released, the first week that COVID was basically hitting the United States, was also a major factor, I think. So at the end of the day, it's most certainly helped create awareness about it and given Carol and others a platform to be able to speak more loudly about it and educate members of Congress on either what they saw and what was wrong about what they saw and what the accurate depiction is, or just awareness in general for those who may not have even watched it and said, well, I've heard of this, so I should probably talk to these people. So I think it's definitely been a help in the long run.
That's amazing. And I was wondering too, aside from the senators who don't want to have any federal law passed, what is the main reason senators don't vote for it yet?
I think the most consistent thing that we heard from people with some opposition, really more so House members, it wasn't necessarily senators, that it's an issue of private ownership and a slippery slope argument about, well, what next? Will we not be able to own and that sort of thing? But at the end of the day, that's when we come back with that public safety argument and say, look, what are you talking about when you're talking about ownership versus risking not only your children's lives, but the lives of other children out there? And I think that message really resonated with some of the folks that tried to make that point.
Yes, and I thought that was very smart to include that safety aspect in the law, because it really makes it appealing to all parties. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and I hope you get to see the day and celebrate when the Big Cat Public Safety Act is passed in Congress. That would be amazing. I think I can pass on to Kat now.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I've got my Roomba finishing up. So I know that they had just adjourned for the holiday and won't be back until the 3rd. But what is the timeline that you think is most realistic when they do return? When can we expect more information on the progress of this?
Well, I think we'll see something happen before the end of January, some sort of action, because we're going to have something moving before the end of January in one of the two chambers to keep the momentum going and then get the bill through whatever committee we might have to or whatever process we might have to in the other chamber. While they might be in recess now, they still do have what they call a pro forma session, where even if members of Congress are not necessarily physically in Washington, D.C., or they're not in a full session, they gavel in and go into a temporary session for a few minutes, and they take on co-sponsors that can be added online during that pro forma session. So I think between now and the first of the year, when Congress comes back the first week of January, we'll see some more co-sponsors added through that mechanism, which is going to give us a big boost. I think most of them will be people that Carol met with when she was here. And then after the first of the year, we'll be talking with both of the sponsors in the House and the Senate on both sides of the aisle. Really, there are 4 sponsors, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and seeing where they've landed. Most likely what we'll probably see is what I was talking about, something on the Senate side where they make an attempt to go through that hotline process and see where we stand, see who opposes it, see who might be able to change their mind if they're convinced with the right argument. And quite honestly, a lot of times is what you have senators that put a hold on it, and the sponsor of the bill may just go have an individual talk with that senator and work something out amongst themselves. So I think we'll see some movement of some kind before the end of January.
That's exciting. Thank you. Carol?
Hi. Thank you so much, Marty, for coming to ClubHouse, and also for everything that you're doing in Washington. I know Carol's delighted to have you. I'm actually going to take this opportunity to make another plug for our classes that are in the Big Cat Rescue official group. If you are a member, great. If you're not, it is a public group. You just go to, or just search for Big Cat Rescue Official is the name of the group. And once you are in it, there are tabs across the top of the screen, one of which says guides, like user guides. And if you click on or select the guides tab, we have a whole bunch of classes out there. And currently the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th classes that are on the list cover the Big Cat Public Safety Act. It will tell you exactly what it does, give you examples, tell you why it needs to be passed. The next one is about how to make the call of the wild, including what to do if you're nervous about it. It'll show you details of step-by-step how to do it. It'll show you a video of someone making the call. And like I say, there's all kinds of tips in there. And the 3rd one we just added recently, and I had to mention it because Marty talked about making the call and then also following up with an email with some attachments, and that's what the 3rd one is for. And it is called Big Cat Public Safety Act, or BCPSA, endorsement letters. And those are letters that you can actually send on an email and attach. And they are from a variety of law enforcement organizations explaining why they think it should be passed. And the letters are fascinating. I know there's one out there. It may not be appropriate for your specific state, but there was one in particular out there from Texas that was from a deputy who had been on duty during a hurricane, and they were trying to find places to shelter people, and there was a church that they wanted to put people in the sanctuary, and they couldn't do it because they discovered there was a lion living in the sanctuary. So there are a lot of letters that you can send, both nationally, and there is also a video of the sheriff from Zanesville explaining why he supports the Big Cat Public Safety Act. So they're great for those people who seem resistant, and as was mentioned, that are more into the what can I own angle, because all these letters are on the public safety, and there's at least 4 letters that are national that you can send, as well as the video, and you could do that on multiple contacts, send a different one each time. So it's the Facebook group, Big Cat Rescue Official, and just click on the Guides tab, scroll down, and you'll find them. Thank you.
No, that's a really great point. We have talked, I failed to mention that. Thank you for bringing that up, because the National Sheriff Association and the Fraternal Order of Police both endorsed the bill, along with countless state agencies and state sheriff's associations, and that is definitely a huge, very, very helpful point with these members of Congress.
Great, thanks. Luana.
Okay, I want to start out by thanking Marty for all of his work on the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and I'm a horse person too, so thank you for the work that you've done on that as well. Next, I want to say Carol Judge, better known to most of us as CJ, has spent countless hours, 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls and discussions, putting those guides or classes together in that Facebook group. She has worked her fanny off putting that together. So please, everybody, go take a look at it if you want to know more about, the behind the scenes workings of how to get a bill passed and things like that. It's very informative. And thanks to Carol who has led us and taught us and encouraged us, and all of you who actually take the time to make that call. It takes just a couple of minutes to make that call every week at bigcatact.com. Please talk about it over coffee. Talk about it when you're standing in the grocery store line. The Big Cat Public Safety Act will not get passed if everybody doesn't get off their fanny and make that 2-minute phone call every week.
Marty, Luana is the head of our online team, and she could tell you how many people she is organizing online for us. I don't even know the numbers, but it's like astonishing.
Well, she's absolutely right, and every week is important to call and write with the follow-up every week. You're absolutely right.
And anybody out there who hasn't made the call of the wild, if you want somebody to help you, just contact one of us, and we'll chat with you on the phone before you make the call, talk to you after you make the call, or we'll sit online with you while you're on your phone making the call. I encourage everybody who is excited about getting the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed to get together with your friends and organize a calling tree. And whatever day of the week you set that you're all going to call, make your call and then check with the next person on your calling tree and say, hey, I made my call. Did you make yours? That's how this is going to get passed. So I will turn it over to the next person. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, I guess that's me. Marty, thank you so much for everything you do. I have to admit, I geeked out just a little bit when you said you'd been recognized by Queen Elizabeth. So very cool.
Thank you. Yes, that was neat. Very neat.
That was pretty neat because even though she does race her horses, we know how informed and knowledgeable and what a horse lover she is. So very cool for you. Congratulations. So you're welcome. My question has been partially answered by you, but it's kind of a two-parter. One I just thought of. First of all, it seems kind of a no-brainer that caring about animals would be a yes. So does it boil down to money and this whole thing about rights that people are hesitant to sign on? And then the second question that I never thought about before is, once people have either co-signed or agreed to sponsor, can they change their mind and go back on it? So those are my two questions.
Yes, very, very, very good questions. So when someone co-sponsors a bill, they actually can remove their name as a co-sponsor, but they physically have to walk down to the House floor and speak from the podium and give their reasons why, and they'll withdraw it. And I have yet to see anybody ever do that on one of our bills. Thank goodness. And I hope that trend never starts. And I think it's probably more so because they don't take the time to go do it. It's a lot easier to sign on than it is to bring yourself off. Now, what I have seen a lot of is, for instance, the PAST Act, and I think we might have seen this a little bit with the Big Cat bill, where we had co-sponsors of the bill who had signed their name on, but then they voted against it. And in those instances, it's typically been because the leadership on whatever side of the aisle it may be, and this was the Republican leadership on both of the times I'm talking about with Big Cats and the FAST Act, where they were telling their members they should vote against it. And you'll get, 8 or 10 or so who are co-sponsors that vote against it, but then you also end up picking up probably twice as many or 3 times as many that weren't co-sponsors that vote for it. So it seems to work out better to our advantage in the wash. But they can go remove their name. They can still vote against it, and those options are there. Fortunately, it's just not happening that often. Thank goodness.
Well, that's good to hear. I will send it on to, it looks like, Melissa.
Thank you, Lisa. I think my question goes more to Carol and maybe Marty. Being from the younger generation and the we have to have it now generation, would it maybe be more in our best interest to have our local stars, per se, I don't know, like Ian Somerhalder, somebody who's into the environment and into everything that goes on, push more for the Public Safety Act, and maybe once they get involve their fans in it? I know that we've done it a little bit with Dancing with the Stars and stuff like that, but I think there's a whole market out there of people that really want to get involved as far as stars and stuff like that have a huge following that we're maybe missing. Is that something maybe we can do? Because Florida, I know our senators.
Priscilla Presley was probably, prior to Carol Baskin coming to D.C., the one who drew the most attention because everybody knows Elvis or knew Elvis and that sort of thing. But it's not the younger crowd or the millennial crowd, of course. I think it definitely helps more so with the engagement of their fans because they have 10 million followers. Or I had one time I wrote an op-ed about this terrible member of Congress from Tennessee and her terrible record on animals, and Taylor Swift shared it on Instagram, and I don't even know how many shares it got, just tons of them. So it definitely helps. But it's not so much about the celebrity's name as it is the access to their millions of fans where they share an action alert or something like that. Now, with that said, there is no celebrity that I have had a better response to, including everyone I just named, come to Washington, D.C., than Carol Baskin. So we kind of, in this one instance on this bill, we've kind of got our own celebrity that's more well-known than the rest of them that are probably out there. But still important to engage those folks so we can get their fans to take action and reach many more people.
I have to agree with you there. On to Barbara. Thank you, guys.
Barbara, did you want to your mic? Did you want to speak?
Oh,
there you go.
Me, I've already done that. So.
Yeah, I think you got down at the bottom of the stack again. How about Zach? I don't think we've heard from Zach yet.
I just popped on.
Okay.
I want to thank you, Marty, for coming tonight, and maybe everybody open up your microphones and tell Marty how much you appreciate the work that he's doing to save these animals.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all, Carol. I really appreciate it. And everybody, if you want to follow us, I'm on all the social media platforms at Marty Irby, MartyIrby. And we have a lot of messaging out there on a wide array of animal issues. And just appreciate everyone here and all you do.
Carol, get Taylor Swift in on it.
I do not know Taylor Swift. I don't know any celebrities.
Carol's the bigger celebrity.
She is. Truly, she is. Truly, we have the best celebrity ever. We love you, Carol.
Thank you. Usually Deb is the person who alerts us as to what we're doing next week. Karen, I think we're doing Christmas chatting.
Yeah, I know we're talking about domestics next week. I don't know if she's gotten everything in order yet, but that's what we're doing. I think she's got some very interesting things lined up about domestic cats. So that's what I know about it so far.
I have the best 2 domestic cats due to Big Cat Rescue ever.
Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
I do.
You're going to have to join us for that.
I have Bobby and Ruthie, Poppy's little mate.
They're actual celebrities as well.
Yes, so, they are. And they're doing amazing.
Yes. So that's what we have for next week. And hopefully everybody will join in again. And thank you again, everybody. Have a great rest of the weekend. And Marty, again, thank you so very much. And Carol, of course, you are our big celebrity. But so nice to hear what all this has come to. It's all good. Everything actually turned out to be amazing. So we're behind you, and thank you for everything.
Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye. Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Night.
Good night, everybody.